And we have an all-star panel that I worked with some years at the legislature. That group hasn't changed at the Capitol Press Corps a whole lot. They sometimes switch desks around, but it's the same crew. There is a whole community at the Capitol that includes the usual suspects, legislators, legislative staff, and lobbyists. Another critical component of the community is the Capitol Press Corps. This is a tight-knit group of journalists that covers every aspect of state politics, oftentimes translating extremely complicated issues into understandable stories for the audiences. And today with us, we have three veteran political reporters who have joined us. Closest to the end is Brian Bakst, who has covered politics and government for Minnesota Public Radio since 2016. Prior to that, he was a Capitol correspondent for the Associated Press, and next year will be his 20th session of the legislature. Next, we have Star Tribune writer Lori Sturdevant, who writes editorials in a weekly column about state government and politics. It's a topic that she's covered more than 35 years. She began her career with the Star Tribune as a summer replacement reporter in 1975. She was a lead Capitol reporter and then newsroom assignment editor before joining the editorial staff in 1992. And next to me is Bill Werner. He is the political reporter for the Minnesota News Network, or MNN, and has covered state and national politics for 25 years. Bill joined MNN in 1992 and became the network's political reporter in 1993 and helped establish Minnesota News Network's Capitol Bureau. Please welcome our media panel. All right, jumping right into it, we're going to start with Brian. What do you find most rewarding about covering state politics, and what do you find most challenging?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me next to these two. I feel like the rookie that Dane Smith's old pal Bob Ware used to call me. What I find most rewarding is the characters are always engaging. We seem to have this revolving door of drama at the Capitol, and drama's good to cover because it keeps things moving and it keeps the stories fresh. What's more disappointing or problematic about it is we seem to be in this phase where they never want to get to a decision. So even if you kind of see where the path is going to be in January, and that's where they end up in June or July, there's a lot of in between where they're just kind of spinning their wheels, and I don't think that that's very inviting to the public and to people who have issues pending before the legislature, because it makes it hard to kind of track.
Lori, what do you find rewarding and challenging being part of the press corps?
Well, thank you, Marty, for that good question, and thank you to CGMC for inviting me back again this year. It's been a treat for me to be with this organization and to share some ideas with some old friends here. I hope we can visit some of us after this is over. Thanks for the good work that you do at the Capitol. The lobbyists, the ideas that you present really make a difference at the Capitol. You are very well represented as an organization at the state Capitol. Well, as Marty said, I'm kind of the old timer on this panel. I've been around the legislature since the 1970s, and it was a good time for a kid from Del Rapids, South Dakota to land at the Minnesota legislature. I kind of got stuck there. State government really matters in this state. I had that sense from the beginning, and in the 1970s when we were kind of making modern Minnesota in a lot of ways, I got caught up in that sense of state building. A time when Minnesotans felt like at the state government level we could be a little innovative, we could do some creative things in healthcare and in education funding, and LGA was invented in the early 70s, as you know, but there was a willingness to try things and do some policy experimentation in the sense that this was the level of government that really made a difference in the quality of Minnesotans' lives. And that's what's kept me engaged at the Capitol all these years in one role or another. So what frustrates me is when it seems like we have lost some of that ambition and some of that willingness to be innovative. It's not completely gone, but there have been some sessions when not much happened, and when I felt that the gridlock was really an impediment, the partisan nature of our legislature. Right back to the legislature, we had just a few years before dropped party designation. And we were still operating a bit with that long history of nonpartisan legislature, which we had, I believe it was from about 1911 until the change was made in the early 70s back to party designation. That change itself wasn't the manufacturer of the increased partisanship, but it was a marker of that, I think, and it seems like in each succeeding year. Minnesotans have been more in their warring camps, their two-party camps, and less willing to find middle ground on some of the things that really matter in your community. So that's what worries me and frustrates me.
Werner?
Thank you for inviting me here today. I appreciate that. You folks do a lot of important work, and it's good to be able to see you here, all in a group. I thought about when I was driving up here how much what you do is so important. Dealing with everyday things. The lights on, the street lights, are the streets plowed, all these kinds of things that are necessary. Is the water going to come on when you turn the tap? So I guess the reason I mention this is not only to thank you, but also to say that I think the thing that I enjoy most about being a political reporter is regular folks coming to the Capitol, not the politicians, the career politicians. And I don't really put you in the same category as career politicians in Washington, D.C. as an example, or even at the state legislature. So the issues, the people and the issues coming to the state capitol, that is what I like the most. Conversely, the thing that I like the least is the politics. And that might be strange for a political reporter to say. In some ways, to me, it's a necessary evil. I know we have to do politics, it's just part of the whole thing. But sometimes it clouds the issues, the addressing of what people really need, and sometimes we get that done even in spite of that. So that, again, thank you for the work that you do, and we'll proceed.
Very good. Next one, we'll start with Bill. The question is, as journalists, you're constantly making choices about what issues need attention. What is an issue or topic in state policy making that you think doesn't get the coverage it deserves, even though you're a member of the media? Is there something that you think is really important but just doesn't get the discussion it needs, maybe particularly in rural Minnesota?
Yeah, let me, Marty, respond to that. You're looking for a specific issue, but I'd like to respond a little bit more generally. Okay? I've always felt that it's important for me as a journalist to be able to represent people who usually don't have a voice. Whether that be people outside of the Twin Cities area, okay, who don't have as much of a voice perhaps in some of the folks in the Twin Cities. I don't think that's right, because what's outside of the folks that are outside of the Twin Cities area represent about half the state. Okay? People who are poor, people who are not politically well connected, people who do not have, forgive me for saying this, coalition folks who don't have lobbyists representing them even. So I've always felt that is the most important thing. Those are probably the people who, in my opinion, are the most underrepresented. So when I make a choice on balancing a story, I need to balance both sides. But in making a decision, I'm probably always going to lean a little bit more toward not so much giving more coverage, but being sure that the person who doesn't have a voice does. So I hope that kind of answers it very well.
I'd like to answer that more generally too, rather than with a specific issue. Early in my legislative reporting career, a wise legislator whom I respected said, it is the job of the state legislature to set the table with the infrastructure pieces and the other kinds of pieces of our society, set the table for the prosperity of the next generation. The business of state government is mostly future-oriented. Where I think we fall down and don't give sufficient attention is to those things that really have a long timeline. The legislature operates, as you well know, on a 2-year budget cycle and a 2-year election cycle, and our time horizon gets to be about 2 years on lots of things. I don't think we're very good at looking 10 years out, 20 years out. The workforce shortage that many of you are now experiencing was first forecast in my hearing at about 15 or 20 years ago, with some good work being done in the State Demographer's Office and some good work being done by the Minnesota Private College Council's Foundation. And I remember writing editorials about that in those years, but we didn't really start talking about workforce shortage in earnest until the last year or so when the problem is right here upon us. And our options of how to respond to it are much more limited as a result. I must say, I think we sometimes still haven't really realized that the problem for us economically in Minnesota in the next 15 years or so is going to be a shortage of talent, not so much of jobs, though the two are very much related. So getting our thoughts going around that long-term thinking, that's what I think we need to put more attention on.
You know, I want to build on something that Lori said, is that kind of the big think part of the legislature has really gone away. And even among the candidates for governor and the people who have been governor, they're not really thinking in those kind of what is that big idea that can really change or move the state. And I took a very long route up here to Fergus Falls. I started off on the North Shore, and I drove across northern Minnesota to the North Dakota border and then down, because I wanted to take some time, as long as I was coming here, to talk to some real folks out there in the communities about what types of things are on their minds and what types of issues are really vexing them. And one of the things, to build on another thing that Lori said that I heard, was kind of about the mismatch between where the jobs are and where the workforce is, and things like affordable housing. Stuff like that we don't think about a lot down there at the Capitol, because it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And, you know, going back, I'm going to hopefully try to keep that on my plate for the next year and the years to come, and that's particularly in places that are dealing with big expansions of the employer in town, or regional centers that are doing well and trying to draw in talent from other places. There's just the shortage of kind of the affordable housing there to keep those people, and also the amenities when they're not working. What are they doing to make those communities more attractive? And I think sometimes lawmakers will see that as fluff, and I don't know that they're making the connection. So those are some of the things that I'm going to kind of take away from my drive out here in the last few days, and hopefully apply that to the report in the months and years to come.
Great. Next one's a little more interesting. Lori, we're going to start with you. A certain unnamed national political figure has made a habit of challenging the media and its reporting of the new term fake news. Do you ever get that type of pushback from elected officials, either in the past or recently, that you've tried to cover, or from your regular audience?
We have a good memory of a governor who treated the state capitol press corps much the same way that President Trump is treating the White House press corps. Jesse Ventura called us all the worst capitol press corps, which is a label we took so much to heart that we had some pink T-shirts made up. Do you remember those, Bill? That with white lettering saying "worst capitol press corps." Permich said that about us too. That's right. That's right. But Ventura called us jackals. That's right. But nevertheless, we've been put in the doghouse by governors in the past. And then I'll tell a personal story about Ventura. He was unhappy with me once, and we encountered each other at the state fair in the back room of the WCCO booth. And I had my then 10-year-old daughter with me at the fair that day. And he just got off the air, saw me standing there, and in front of a bunch of people really lit into me about something I had written that he did not like. And I stood there and took it for a while, and then I just said, "Governor, I'd like you to meet my daughter." And just hope that he felt about this big, because he thought it was inappropriate how he behaved that day. And I hope that once in a while President Trump winds up feeling about that big, but I'm not sure he's capable of feeling that way. We'll see how that plays out. What the response of the press corps when that happens is to take it in our stride. To know that in the minds of some of the people we cover, going after us is simply good politics. And so that's part of the routine. And then reminding ourselves to do our jobs professionally and as well as we possibly can.
I'm in that camp, and as much as I humanly can, I try to let it roll off me, because it does me no good to engage, and I just let it go and know that we're the perfect foil. I mean, especially heading into an election year, we're going to get a lot of bashing on us particularly in the Republican side. It seems to make more sense. It seems to have more currency on the Republican side to land to us, because they think we're the tank. What troubles me about it is it reflects what's going on not only with the media but in other places. There seems to be an erosion in the faith in institutions, and that's where I'm worried, because there seems to be people who don't trust the media, people who don't trust their local officials, people who don't trust their state officials, and people who only subscribe or listen to kind of the same type of thinking or the same views that they have. And that's until kind of we can break that down in some way, I think it's only going to get worse, and I don't know how to kind of pull it back.
Bill?
I'm a little divided on this because, I didn't like getting beat on by Jesse Ventura. I mean, I didn't have a chance against him anyway, just as far as size is concerned, right? I remember when he grabbed the microphone out of my hand and dropped it on the rotunda, floor of the rotunda at the Capitol, when he did like something I did. I think I still have, I don't have a microphone. Somebody took it, stole it, probably has it framed or something with a dent in it. But that aside, I think that if we're doing our jobs right as reporters, that some people are going to get angry at us. It's just the way it is. And I think we need to some degree, we need to take a step back from it and say, well, does this person, is what they're saying legitimate at all? Maybe not let them influence us so much, but at least consider it. Oftentimes it is politics, oftentimes it's opportunistic. Jesse Ventura, Donald Trump is doing that with the media to some degree. Brian brought up the issue of basically of social media, which is interesting in that I think what your statement was is that some people just basically think about things a certain way and they don't want to open their minds to other things. That's probably true. On the other hand, I'm very divided on social media, whether it's good or bad, because should you have to have a broadcasting license station, a broadcasting station license, spending millions of dollars for that, or be able, forgive me for saying this, be able to print a newspaper to get news out there, or should everyone have access? It's a heavy responsibility for all of us in social media, and a lot of people don't take it that way. But it has changed the dynamic totally, and hence we are getting feedback from people now, from regular folks on the street, through comments on social media for our reporting. Is that good or bad? I think it puts a higher standard of performance on us, which is good. I guess that's what I want to say.
Next one, we'll start with Brian. This actually leads into a little bit of what you talked about right here. Common complaint from residents in greater Minnesota, the group here, is that the Twin Cities gets all the attention. They feel like they know a lot about what's going on in the Twin Cities, but people really don't understand the concerns of people in the rural areas. Do you think the media is doing a good enough job of telling these stories of greater Minnesota, and what could be done to increase the coverage of rural issues, particularly with the consolidation of downsizing of a lot of our traditional media outlets? For example, Worthington Daily Globe is now, as of last month, just the Globe, and it comes out twice a week. How do you get stories told? Do you think greater Minnesota is getting its fair shake? Are we just whiners?
There's no question we can do better, and I hope that we will do better, but I want to put a plug in for my organization, which is now only a couple of years into working with Minnesota Public Radio, but we have bureaus in Moorhead, and Duluth, and Bemidji, and Worthington, and Rochester, and St. Cloud area, Collegeville, and those people do great work. Whenever I come up and say, hey, there's a good story to be told about what's happening with what's going on in greater Minnesota, they'll do it. They are hungry to do those stories. They're so close to you that, I mean, I don't know if the mayor is still here, but as he was talking, I was messaging with my colleague in Moorhead to say, if you haven't met the mayor, you should try to meet the mayor, because he seems to be kind of a break from the mold, and he'd be good to get to know and talk to for stories that you're doing. He said he's already made contact with them in the past, but keep in mind that we need to hear from you too. And you guys are often down at the Capitol, and you have your big lobby day, but sometimes that's the big push we get from folks who have to drive quite a ways to get to the Capitol, and we don't hear from you on a regular basis. Always call me, email me. I will kind of leave my information with folks here to pass along if you want. I'm interested in hearing kind of things that are bubbling up, and I might not get to everything, but I try to get to a lot. I did a story this last session. I went down and wrote a story about this golf course in Fairfax, outside of Fairfax, that the DNR was planning to close, and the local community was rising up because it was one of the big draws that they have for tourists and for the people in town, stuff to do. And it was great to get out there, and I want to get out there, and I just need a hook or a compelling story to tell to get out there, and my editor will either let me go or they'll bring in one of the Greater Minnesota reporters to help out.
You know, you are not whining when you say that you'd like more coverage, more attention from news organizations. There's a systemic thing that goes on with in a state like Minnesota with the broadcast stations, NPR accepted, many of them based in the Twin Cities. It means so that all of you know quite a lot about what's happening in the Twin Cities, quite a lot about the controversy with the Minneapolis Police Force, for example. And Twin Cities folks wind up knowing a bit less about what's going on in your communities, and I don't like that. I'm a person who cares very much about the ability of this state to hang together as one state. The rural-urban political divide is something that worries me and grieves me, because I see how important it is that we are able to find common ground at the state level so in order to function as we have in Minnesota. So I'm very eager to help tell your stories, and I hope you share a bunch of them with me before we leave today. I think that there is really still much more that we have in common, metro and urban folks, than we sometimes know, and helping us realize that is part of the mission of your state newspaper, the Tribune.
Yes, I do think that Greater Minnesota gets fallen short. You know, I'm kind of in a weird position because I work for a statewide radio network that focuses on Greater Minnesota, and many of your communities have Minnesota News Network affiliates in them. We operate on a little different model than Minnesota Public Radio does. Of course, they have bureaus, we rely on our affiliates. So I would say, and echo perhaps what Brian said, please let your local affiliate radio station know you have been an affiliate about particular issues, and encourage them then to let us know about that as well, or call us directly. But I sit down there in Minneapolis, and I sometimes think, you know, here it is. It's like this world unto itself, and we're getting all worked up and wrapped around the axle about issue A, B, C, and D. Whereas in Greater Minnesota, they may be totally different. Some of these issues may, like as an example, police departments and how they treat people. Okay, this is an issue in areas of Greater Minnesota as well, but it gets much more attention because of what's happening in the Twin Cities area. So I guess what I'm saying is, please, at least from my standpoint, I ask you to let our affiliates know throughout Minnesota what your issues are, and I'll be sure to know those then. And when you get down to the Capitol, be sure to look me up, and we will go from there and try to rectify the situation, try to bring more representation for Greater Minnesota in. This is a great state, and I'm probably using a hackneyed phrase, but I believe that the more of this state that I see over the years, and I've lived here my whole life, but I see more and more pieces of it the older I get, and I like every part of it for different reasons. And so therefore we do have to be one state, and let's all move forward together on this.
All right, starting with Lori, aside from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, what advocacy group or groups are the most effective at getting the message out? What makes them so effective as an organization?
Well, kind of run down the list of popular lobbyists, it sounds like. It is the case that money talks. And money talks probably louder than it maybe should in Minnesota politics. That's true in our entire country. When I'm out as an editorial writer speaking with Minnesota audiences, and we ask, people are given the chance to ask me about issues that I perceive, it's pretty common that someone will bring up campaign finance reform because they are concerned that big money is talking pretty loudly in our state government right now. So that's true on both the left and the right. We have the Minnesota Chamber. The reason you see that big tax cut that Bradley had on his slide with the freeze on the statewide business property tax that will apply to the year 2026, be costing us $400 million a biennium. That's because that was the #1 priority of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Education Minnesota is a big lobby on the left side of things, certainly on the education spending side. All session long we were talking about not a very robust surplus, a modest surplus, and should be having modest spending bills. And within the education bill then the conference committee, it got bigger, not smaller. And that's the handiwork of Education Minnesota. And those would be the two lobbying forces that come immediately to my mind. I've been wondering about the influence of national special interest groups more than we used to see. There's a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council that's funded by the Koch brothers, and we see some of their model legislation popping up from time to time. But I think the big players still are Minnesota players rather than national players in our state lobbying force.
Brian, which groups do you think are most effective at getting their messages out and why?
I'm going to dodge on this one, or as you guys used to like to do, pivot away from it. Just because there are so many different groups that are good at what they do, and it depends on kind of what's in front of the legislature in that year. And Bradley made a point that a lot of people will remember this last session as the Sunday sales session, and he's probably right, because that was an issue that people could relate to. It was easy to understand. You could not buy liquor on Sundays before they changed the law, and then you could after. So it was pretty black and white. And that's often the trouble we have telling stories about the more complex things, making them relatable to the people in the communities. When we talk about LGA, sometimes, especially later in session, it can be kind of this big blob in the budget, or a line item in the budget that people don't understand. But when you talk about it as, it's 5 police officers or 3 firefighters in our town that we're going to have to lay off or won't be able to hire, or some street maintenance that we're not going to be able to do, that hits home. And that's a story that is easier to tell. So I often tell people when I speak to groups is, find me good concrete examples as to why what you're fighting for matters, and it becomes an easier story to report, an easier story to tell than just they need $50 million. A lot of people go, $50 million means what? I don't get it. But if you put it into, your firefighter response times are going to dramatically slow down if you have to deal with less aid or things like that, it becomes much more relevant.
Bill?
I always try to get an idea of this by trying to figure out which organizations get the legislature in an uproar most effectively. Marty, you've seen a few of those over the years, and I know my fellow reporters here have too. Anything that deals with sports. I mean, let's look back, okay, on how long we wrangled with the Minnesota Twins Stadium, Minnesota Twins Target Field, and how long we wrangled with the Vikings Stadium, okay? Those are the ones. And the reason why is that whether you like it or not, a lot of Minnesotans are concerned about that. And so, that's the one I look at. Education Minnesota is certainly one that is very influential, as Lori mentioned. Minnesota Chamber, on the other side, they have historically had a real big input in a lot of major areas, including the gas tax increase, the override of the governor's veto, the storied override. And I know, Marty, you had a lot of experience with that particular round. I think also the state employee unions, particularly in the current administration, have a lot of influence. AFSCME particularly, and to a lesser extent MAPE, and also SEIU in a tertiary sense. And we have not seen it for a while, but we did see it come to bear early on in my time in the legislature, back in the early 1990s, when public utilities were holding forth in very strong form at the Minnesota legislature on the issue of nuclear waste storage at Prairie Island. These are kind of the the big boys in the room, I think, that kind of pop back up periodically. So that would kind of be my short list.
You know, when Brian talked about Sunday sales, I thought it was interesting how many bills I've seen where the Senate Majority Leader and Minority Leader and the committee chair were all against it and it still passed. That's pretty amazing if you think about the organic support on that. Next one, is it difficult to maintain a positive working relationship with lawmakers when your job often requires you to criticize them or expose their actions? We'll start with Bill.
No. I have found the vast majority, with one or two exceptions, and I've known hundreds, thousands, I suppose, of elected officials over the years, found very small proportion of them that take it personally. That's good in the sense that it's professional. We have to be very careful that we all, and I put myself in this category too, don't start dealing with all this as a commodity, right? Instead of people's lives, issues, and it's kind of a theoretical thing, right? So sometimes people should get angry at people, but in all honesty, most people that I've dealt with over the years have been very professional, even though they may be just absolutely, you know what, ticked off, I won't use the other term, at me.
I've got it even worse because I'm in the business of occasionally endorsing one candidate over another in October of even numbered years. And by and large, people that I've dealt with over the years, very professional, positive relationships. In a few weeks, we'll have a state senate reunion at the Capitol, and the press corps, I think all of us have been invited. The relationships that we've established have really been important. And that puts me on, it reminds me of a soapbox I've been on lately about what is authentic leadership in a democracy. And I think relationship-based leadership is what is so important, and what Minnesota still has, I think, in abundance. And it's one of our greatest strengths. We need to hang on to that. We need to not let ourselves get so partisan and so divided from one another in our various tribes that we don't keep relationships. If we can have strong relationships one with another, I think that there is still a good chance we can keep this state running in a way that will make us all proud.
And I've been crossways with some legislators up there. It's hard not to be. We're up there as long as we've all been. That there are some lawmakers that don't like what you do or don't like what you've written, but I'm not necessarily there to be their friend. I'm there to be, as Laura said, have a good working relationship, because we have a job to do, they have a job to do. More so, we get it from the staff. I think there are staff there that will harbor grudges more than the lawmakers will. All I want is for the lawmakers I deal with to have a sense of mutual respect, that they're going to be straightforward with me, I'm going to be straightforward with them. If I'm working on a hard-hitting piece, I'm not going to blindside them. That I'm going to come to them and say, hey, I've got this information about you. I want to check out to make sure it's true, and then I want you to, explain it. And I'm not going to, unless it's something that has already exploded out there, I'm not going to rush it out just to get in their face about it. And so, for me, it's just that keeping that respect on both ends is the most important thing, because I don't want this reputation as kind of a guy who's going to do a hit job on somebody, and they don't want to be on the receiving end of it. So.
Very good. Next one, what advice would you have for city leaders in our audience today who are interested in potentially getting media attention to issues that may be important to their communities?
Pick up the phone and give us a call, especially me. I'd like to hear from you, really would. There is an eagerness to help tell Greater Minnesota stories. There's a lot of respect for what that you're trying to do in your communities and the challenges that you are up against. In some ways, what's happening in Greater Minnesota with the workforce, for example, is a bellwether of what's going to happen to the whole state in the next decade. We want to know about how your challenges and how you are addressing them. And we want to know about how you're overcoming some of the gridlock that has afflicted other layers of government. I don't think it's near as bad in Greater Minnesota communities, in your city halls. I'd like to hear about that as well. So let us hear from you.
And as much as possible, you guys deal with each other in conferences like this, so you know what's going on. Something that's happening in northeastern Minnesota might be the same thing that's happening in southwestern Minnesota. And the more that you can make it kind of part of a trend or things that are impacting kind of more than one area, or just try to look at it in a different way. How does this issue we have speak to a broader point about why there's more funding, or you need more latitude from government or from state government? And as I mentioned earlier, kind of try to put a face on it, because as much as we can put a face on it, the more that people on the listening end or the reading end will kind of stop and pay attention to it. If it's just Mayor XYZ or City Councilman XYZ, they're like, maybe that's not great. But if you have constituents that are dealing with particular issues, or their lives will be better or made worse by things that are happening or not happening down there, that helps.
Bill?
Ditto to most of what my colleagues said, but the one thing I would say is, I'm not speaking so much for M&N, but if you want statewide coverage, find something really sexy about your particular story, it's possible. I mean, but you know what, look, okay, think about that. Water cooler, think about folks at the water cooler, right? And I understand that, you know, we deal, I mean, you folks deal with bread and butter kind of issues, and LGA may not be very interesting to people. But on the other hand, having to reduce police response might be, having to spend a lot of money that you don't have to get water systems operating properly. You know, that kind of thing may get people's attention. So that'd be the only thing I'd say. Try to get a hook out there that gets it. Think about people around the water cooler, what they might be talking about. And then, and again, I'm not speaking so much for myself as maybe perhaps sending you a hint to deal with other media outlets as well to get their attention.
I want to add something Bill said, just kind of a case in point. When I was still at the AP, we did this kind of package on wastewater treatment and how there's just, it's lagging, the upkeep and weight is lagging. And we needed some kind of vivid example to help tell it. I think it was Denison, where they told us that they had a guy who had to climb down to the sewer and scrape kind of some of the pipes like once or twice a week. And that really brought the story home. I mean, people will then say, oh my God, you know, that's the state of affairs. Something needs to...
I think it was the mayor who did that. Yeah. So congratulations to your mayors, you should keep water flowing in the community.
Keeping the sewage flowing. It's like that. All right, our last question, before we go out to the audience, we're trying to get 15 minutes for the folks in the audience. Our last question is, we are starting to look ahead to the 2018 gubernatorial election. The 2014 race did not seem to have a clear theme or a key singular issue. If you had to predict, what do you think might be the main theme of the 2018 gubernatorial election? We're going to start with Bill Werner.
Oh boy. Okay. So much is dependent on what will happen in Washington. How's that for a disclaimer? But I have to believe that healthcare will be it. I mean, you know, healthcare really resonated in a lot of ways. A lot of people, and you can see fright, desperation on the part of people in the area of healthcare. So far, the Congress and the President have not managed, despite some I think some very valiant efforts, to make progress on this at the national level. So what happens at the state level, what kind of responses do we have to make? I think that plays out into this election. And the other thing I think is also something that is in some ways beyond our control, and a lot of things are beyond our control, unfortunately, and that is the economy. There have been some hints here in this conference that we're not in quite maybe as firm a footing as we would like to be, or at least in solid position we'd like to be. If something happens in that area, of course, the economy always trumps everything, right? And that would be my prediction in terms of
Maybe sort of a referendum on national healthcare economy. Lori, what do you got?
Well, it will be hard for the Minnesota to avoid a wave that will be happening nationally, I think, in 2018. And healthcare may very well be part of that wave. The reaction to this very unusual presidency will be probably part of that wave. I hope that in Minnesota, though, we look at that graph that Bradley put up that showed our workforce growth by decade and showed a big dip in the coming decade of 2020 to 2030. That's never happened before in this state's history. We've had 160 years of pretty steady growth, even during the Great Depression of the 30s. We had workforce growth as that 18 to 64-year-old population was growing. If the growth falls almost to zero under the projections we have now. There are things Minnesota can do by way of policy, and things that you can do in your communities and that the state can help you do to help mitigate the trouble that that's going to cause us. And we should be talking about that in the next governor's race. I understand some of you have been talking about a child care shortage in your communities. That's a very local issue, it's a very family-based issue, but it's also it's a statewide issue. I see heads nodding. That's the kind of thing we need to talk about. How are we going to be taking full advantage of that population of baby boomers who are retiring in the 20 to 30 years? Use that still healthy talent, I hope will still be healthy then, to help mitigate some of those difficulties so that we can go through this talent trough, this workforce trough, and come out prosperous on the other side. It's also about education. Oh, there's so many things that workforce shortage relates to. So I hope we are talking about that a lot in the next 2 years.
I definitely think that the economy writ large will be kind of the underlying theme, but as much as you all would like to avoid it, we would like to avoid it, I just think that this phase where things have been much more personal politically, and I think there's going to be a lot of money washing in. This is one of the few states in the Midwest that has kind of kept kind of a Republican wave at bay, so both sides are going to be fighting on that front. And Minnesota is one of the states that, all our neighbors have complete Republican control. I don't think Minnesota has had complete Republican control as part of as a nation. 69 to 70 was the last session, so you can expect that. And there's just the amount of money from the outside will take this kind of in a direction that gets ugly very quickly. And I don't know if it's intentional or not, but a lot of the candidates out there don't like to talk in depth about kind of what they'll do to solve problem X, Y, or Z. Either they're not proficient in all of the things, or they feel like it can trip them up and be used against them in that 30-second campaign ad. So they try to avoid it as much as possible. I mean, I know from experience trying to pin people down in particular, it's tough. I mean, there's not many people. I remember when the last candidate for governor got in, I went around and I looked at all the websites, and I think I came across 3 of the 14 or 15 that even had an issue section on their webpage. So if that's kind of forecast anything, people don't put out the 28-page book like you did when you ran it last time. It's not.
Doesn't get you too far.
And gave their opponent something to feast on.
Exactly. All right, we have some time for our audience questions, so just raise your hand and let us know the city you're from, just so they have some context on where you're speaking from. So Josh, go ahead.
Josh from Slayton, no pivoting or dodging here. Who will be the next governor of Minnesota?
The question is, who's going to be the next governor? We're going to start with Brian.
I don't know if we've seen the candidate that yet. I would almost suspect that there's going to be this outside candidate that we're not even talking about yet that's going to get, and that's why I hesitate to guess. And we don't know if the House Speaker is going to run. I mean, he would potentially be a force, although whether he can get endorsed by his party would be a big question. We don't know if there's going to be an endorsement in the Democratic Party because there is such a mass of candidates that will divide up that pie. So this might be one of those years where it could be August until we know kind of who the 2 combatants will be.
There is no clear frontrunner in either party, and that is kind of remarkable, even though these campaigns are too long, and I would agree with all those of you who would say that. Still, it's kind of unusual that there is no clear frontrunner. And when Tim Walz got into this race on the Democratic side, I thought he might rather rapidly emerge as a frontrunner, and he has not. So it's really a wide open field. it's fun to watch.
Bill?
Okay, no pivoting. Well, yeah, this is a very difficult one. I think the one person who is thought of as perhaps being Republicans' best chance to take the governorship is not officially in the race yet. And you know whom I'm referring to, the Speaker of the House, Kurt Dowd. I echo what Lori says in terms of Tim Walz, that he hasn't gained the momentum yet that you would have expected. If I were going to throw out a real irresponsible projection, I would say it would be Kurt Dowd versus Tim Walz. And then you can analyze the politics of who might be able to get more traction in the Minneapolis suburbs, right? Which is kind of where the decision, I'm sorry, is going to probably be. So I'm sorry, I'm pivoting.
I was at Farm Fest and I saw 5 or 6 DFL candidates yesterday and talked to almost all of them. No Republican candidates, but Kurt Dowd was walking around. So, was he there? Okay, didn't see him. Walking around. Next question, Bob Roeder for the sewer.
Yeah, I was thinking about the comment that Lori made about in terms of baby boomers, and with child care. I thought of the concept of grandparents. It's nice to have the grandkids and you send them home. I'm not too sure how many are going to go into that field.
Yes, I'm now too, so I understand what you're talking about. I do think that we have this interesting demographic thing that's probably never happened before in any society in human history. We've got we have a lot of people between the ages of 65 and say 80 in the next decade, go that high, who are vigorous and talented and have some money to spend and don't want to work full time anymore, but engage them well in their community, and they're susceptible to spending most of their year back home in Minnesota. And this is a challenge, I think, for all of us to take good advantage of that pool of talent, while we also get the millennial generation finally established economically. The millennial generation came of age during the Great Recession, and a lot of them were saddled with a lot of college debt and a lot of other impediments to getting into the middle class securely. And so we've got kind of two kinds of challenges here, all the while that we are dealing with needing to be a talent magnet, thinking about using those resources that we have to the fullest, so we can be. This is actually an interesting kind of a puzzle, I think, a demographic economic puzzle that all of us get to work on in your own communities, but also can work on together through organizations like this. And so I think that's it could be kind of challenging and creative, and maybe